Welcome all to the infamous 706 podcast quarantine edition. Today we'll be discussing the therapeutic benefits of hydroxychloroquine, why requiring masks in private businesses is unconstitutional, and how Barr is the best attorney general in the history of the United States. Hey, can we cut, guys? Tony, I know you write the pre-reads, but I don't know, just this one feels a little odd.
You just stay on.
Just keep going.
You just read what I wrote.
Is it okay? Okay, fine. Keep going. So this week we watched Inception. Anthony picked, I think it was a pity pick, picked my movie Inception. Which is a psychological thriller drama. It's kind of hard to, it's amorphous. It's hard to define the genre for this one, at least for me. A little background, and this is going to give you insight into a piece of me, Kirk, your host for today. Kind of a personal note, but it'll give you some context into why this movie is so special to me. If you've seen the movie, you know that the premise, the movie's about dreams and how ideas can be either implanted or extracted from one another, how we can share dreams and stuff. So, and the fear, the paranoia of being in a dream. So in the summer of 2009, so a year before this movie came out, a year and 2 weeks, I was kind of struck with this idea that this nagging fear, it hit me like a rolling wave, that I was dreaming, and I didn't know how to know for sure if my reality, our reality that we're in right now was the reality. So I spent many hours trying to figure that out. I was very distressed by it. Similarly to how Mal, Leonardo DiCaprio's wife in the movie, Dom's wife, is kind of struck with this nagging uncertainty, this pervasive doubt, this disorientation. It actually caused me to drop out of college, believe it or not. It defined my 20s, for greater or worse. And, so when this movie came out, I thought it was like this ultimate sign from some other power that, I was dreaming. But luckily, therapy can help kind of mitigate psychotic symptoms like that. But it's just a great kind of example of how movies and life can parallel and can crash into each other, and how we each formulate a subjective significance for the movies we see, and the ones we remember, and the ones we can take away from. So anyways, enough about me. Let's go to our panel of experts, our cadre of critics. We have in order, if you guys just want to say hi quick, Tony, Anthony, and Connor.
Hello.
Hi. Hey everybody, I'm Connor.
There we go. So you know the group, the cast of characters. Let's go to Tony first, who is a fan of this movie, as we found out on the last podcast. Tony,
Indeed.
Tell us, give us some thoughts. Give us your take. Lead us wherever you'd like to go.
Well, I want to say first of all that I appreciate your very personal introduction, Kirk, and I think it's very appropriate for this movie, because that's kind of what this movie's about, is the way that art can shape our lives, and the way film, and I guess any form of art, but film in particular, can implant an idea in our mind, because the most the most fascinating moment of the movie, and kind of the most troubling moment, is its climax with the son, the guy they're incepting, played by Cillian Murphy. He has this beautiful moment of catharsis with his father that we, of course, as the audience know, is completely made up. It's completely manufactured. Like, his father didn't like him. From what we know, from all we've gathered, they didn't have a good relationship. But they manufactured this moment of catharsis, and it makes me cry whenever I watch it. When he opens that safe and you see the pinwheel, I tear up. I mean, I find it like an incredibly beautiful and cathartic moment, even though we know it's fake. And many other people have pointed out this movie's kind of parallels with the process of filmmaking, which to me is what kind of explains sort of the fact that these dreams aren't particularly surreal. They all kind of parallel action movies. That's because it's about movies, and it's about how Christopher Nolan loves movies, and it's about how he approaches filmmaking. I think this is an incredibly personal movie. I think it's his best movie. I think that he's been chasing this kind of high watermark ever since. I don't know if he's going to hit here again. I don't want to go on forever because I could talk about this movie for a long time, but I think what I love about it is it's a movie that really hits on every level. It hits on a metaphorical level. It hits on a very literal, visceral action level, on a conceptual level. I think it's one of the best action films ever made, and I think it's a really high watermark for like big budget blockbuster filmmaking in the past 10, 15 years.
Fair enough. All right, Anthony, why don't you bring us in here?
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, first, it's never a pity pick with Kirk. But, I was thinking earlier it's been like a while. It's been actually years since I've seen this movie in full from start to finish. And in that time, I think it's one of those movies that's been sort of dissected and analyzed and written about to death. In some ways, like, I can't get away from, like Tony mentioned, that sort of Devin Faraci Chud article where it's a movie about movies, but also the sort of Mark Fisher, analysis of it, of a movie of the unconscious without surrealism and the way it relates to certain things about the neoliberal identity today. So all these things are kind of playing in my mind. It was actually kind of refreshing to go back to the movie and see it and try to get back to it on its own terms. And in some ways, I mean, I still think it's a very good movie. I still think it's probably Nolan's best, if not up there with his best. In fact, some of the things I remember really liking about it didn't even strike me this time around. And what I found fascinating were things I never really considered before, or certain elements I never even thought to think about. And it may be because of that history of whatever I was reading and things like that, or it may just be I'm older and I'm seeing something different about it.
Why don't you expound for us upon the idea of the crossover between, what was it, neoliberalism and like surface reality, or whatever you were mentioning there with Fisher? Just give us a little paraphrase.
I'm trying to think of the shortest paraphrase would be is one of Fisher's big things, and one of the greatest problems to kind of identify, is the fact that our sort of process of dreaming has been sort of what he calls one of the final frontiers of capitalism in a certain sense. You see it in another movie like Limitless, the idea that you won't sleep, or you could get around this trouble that you have to sleep in order to accomplish everything you need to in the real world, just as like Silicon Valley developing a Soylent, to cut down on mills, to cut down on wasteful activity. But in fact, Inception is kind of a symptomatic of this loss of dreaming being what it should be, which is a surrealistic pulp modernism that's been robbed. And sort of the movie wants to be symptomatic of this kind of zombified capitalism that's happening in the 2008 on period. I don't know if that was a good paraphrase.
We enter, we colonize, we want to colonize and market and mass distribute like a sacred place or a sacred idea.
Yeah, and I don't think it's any coincidence that, like, the film in one hand wants to, the sort of thing that gets the plot moving is the idea of breaking down or preventing a monopoly for competition, though, to come in. But I mean, I don't want to keep talking. I'll let Connor go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Problem is, that was exactly what I was going to say. So, damn it, Anthony, you took my talking point.
Well, I went into your dreams and stole.
Yeah, that was a distraction.
Anthony, I implanted that idea in your dreams. So,
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, to bring this a little bit down to earth, I think this movie is a crazy action movie that I can't believe got made.
Yeah.
Following the tradition of The Matrix, an action movie with some ideas, with some mind blowers. And this is an action movie that goes so far with the mind blowers, that takes the mind blowers to such a huge extent that I found I was not watching the fight at the GoldenEye base. I couldn't even keep track of it. Because I was just thinking about, what was that happened? Wait, what dream level are we in? And what is a kick? And what, I just spent the movie in that constant state of chasing after, right, trying to chase after the mythology and the lore. Sorry, I should say more like the rules that I'm supposed to understand to get into the suspense of the movie. Whereas I think you're just, ultimately you kind of have to give up and get pulled along. But then you also lose kind of the fun of a mind blower, which is that you think you understand, you think you know what's going on, right? You want to feel like you grasp the rules of this world. But I felt they just came so thick and fast that I just totally kind of lost all perspective. I trust that it does make sense if I break it all down. But ultimately, this movie was all about the mind blowers. And I'm not sure the whole "it is a dream" thing, though that is an impactful moment at the end. I don't think it really matters to the movie. But I can elaborate on that more. But that's my general take. Crazy action movie that ultimately I don't think I can really doesn't get me. You know what I mean?
It's interesting that you say, often movies that involve time travel or spending time, things like obviously Back to the Future, Interstellar, Looper comes to mind.
Looper.
I had that same reaction to Looper that you're describing right now, where I felt like I was being dragged by a chariot by my ankles, and it just really felt kind of involuntary and uncomfortable, and not in a exciting way, but where I didn't understand the world, and it just felt like there was a disconnect for me. But
I think Looper, I thought it wasn't quite as dense. I find it really crazy. Maybe because it's how I wait. Sorry, Tony, you said no, it's not.
No. I agree with you. I think Looper is more straightforward. This movie is very convoluted. Yes, definitely.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, but you can't. It depends on your experience, or maybe it's the way my mind works in a certain way, or how I tend to. But I just felt myself, there were too many things at once to keep track of, and that's kind of the cool part about it, right? It's so dense, and the writing has to be so careful and so thoughtful. But yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
There's a shot early in the movie, one of the first shots, or it's in the first 5 minutes, where Leo's in the first dream and just kind of establishing the world and the premise. And you hear the ticking clock, and we look at his watch, and it's a Swiss made. And that felt like almost kind of a meta-textual gesture, or kind of a cocky, this all. I kind of masterfully constructed this grand design.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I don't know, that speaks to the intersubjectivity of it all, right? And how, dreams are so completely, they're the ultimate subjectivity. When we try to explain or convey our dreams to another person, they without fail fall flat unless there's some obvious comedy. And so trying to create this, like a Jungian foundation for us all to explore together regarding dreams, I think is a monumental task that, like you said, Tony was this is his high watermark for me, and very ambitious as well. But I did have some questions I wanted to throw at each of you. Excuse me.
Oh,
So
here comes the rules.
so
If
Connor,
you die on the third level.
no, Connor, I'm curious what your thoughts are on Ellen Page's sexuality. If you wanted to just tell us a little bit about your feelings. I got some angry texts during the movie.
Yeah, no,
you know, cut Tony. Okay, yeah, we'll just leave that
found
out.
that out. I was quite
And
angry.
Yeah.
that goes against how we.
I told her to cut it out on Twitter, but
Yeah. No, let's start with Tony. Tony, was there anything you've watched this movie probably, I'm guessing, a dozen times?
No, I've probably seen it 3 or 4 times.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, because I'm not a person who revisits movies like a ton. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I like to keep that experience pure and like go back maybe every couple of years. But yeah, I've seen it like maybe 4 times now.
You've ingested a lot of the movie and the meta elements to it. So why don't you tell us, was there anything upon this viewing that you either noticed for the first time or rediscovered? Anything that kind of hit you in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I noticed differently this time. I think I don't know. I'm trying to think of like if there was something really, really new. I mean, it is dense, but it's sort of like what Connor was saying with like the rules. I feel like when you've watched it a few times, the rules come easier. Like I definitely can track what's going on. I'm never really confused. I can definitely like track and follow what's going on, which I think aids in appreciating the movie or being able to just kind of follow it. Because I think a lot of the thrill in the movie comes from just like following along these levels and knowing what's happening on each level and having the parallel climaxes is where the real cathartic pleasure of this movie comes from. You know, it's almost like orgasmic, you know, at the end, I think, in this very cinematic way. But no, as far as like details, I mean, I noticed that like that Swish watch shot. I noticed some of the humor and like the heart, I guess, because there were a few lines that really made me laugh, like when Ellen Page is introduced and she's first learning about, you know, building dreams. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt has that little like, oh, you met his wife, you know, just like that. I thought that was like really funny. And just sort of the parts where he kind of like pokes fun at himself a little bit and just how convoluted it's getting. Or Ellen Page is like, wait, who's Dreamer? You know, like I thought that was pretty good. And also just like I appreciated so much, like I think Nolan gets critiqued a lot as being a cold filmmaker. But in this movie, while viewing, I really appreciated this. This is like one of the most like mushy, one of the most sincere, one of the most like emotional movies I've seen. So I think those aspects kind of rung out to me more in this viewing.
Okay, fair enough. It's you know, I was gonna mention, oh yeah, this was like peak Joseph Gordon-Levitt. This was like when he was slated to be the next Batman. Remember that? You know, he's gonna be Batman Beyond after
500 Days of Summer.
Christian Bale. What year was that? That was like 08?
08, 09.
Yeah.
shout out to Brick 05.
Oh, that's
Brick.
I like that better than Looper.
Oh, there you go. All right. So let's go to Anthony. Anthony is our resident film historian. He's seen over 50 films. At least 30% were in the theaters. So you can imagine how much money that is. Anthony, do you draw any parallels? Could you find any correlates between this? I was struck by watching this film how like this film could not obviously beyond the cinematics, the special effects, but this film is born of the 2010s, like it could not exist. It would be very hard for certain ideas within the film to even exist in movies before this. Can you think of another movie or some other sets of movies, and other people feel free to chime in about, you know, any precedents, anything Nolan looked to, anything he drew from?
Well, one, I see all my movies in the theater thanks to MoviePass.
Enter coupon code 706. You get
Good service.
buyback stocks.
No, actually, well, I mean, the obvious, I guess, contenders there would be like what, like Paprika or Perfect Blue, which have always been talked about online as, you know, obvious precedents for like the elevator scene or the hallway fight scene and stuff like that. But I think to like almost like reverse that would be a more interesting thing to me is to think about the movie as actually not really having a sense of like almost time to it, because it's like the technology they use is like really foreign and like classic sci-fi to enter the dream, but it's not explained and it just looks like standard like blood transfusions like type equipment. But it's like also at the same time it's like there's no real like cell phone in the movie. I noticed there's like a few landline type telephones. When he's on the plane, he's still using this like connected thing to the airplane. And in fact, like Cillian Murphy's taking a cab, which is like pre-Uber, you know, like the like Uber moment. But like there's a real sense of like, yes, the movie has to be in the 2000s or even like late 90s in some way. But there's no like thing that I watch and I'm like, oh, this is a late 2000s like setting, or this is like a futuristic setting. So in that way, it's an interesting sci-fi film because it's lost the future element there.
Well, he wrote the movie, I think, like 10 years before it was made, and he didn't have the resources to get it made until after.
Right.
So that's probably the practical reason for that.
Well, I read a number of different like things. Is like some like mythology of it is like they came up with the initial conception when he was like 16, 17.
Oh, wow.
And things like that. And like certain spec ideas, you know, like how much he did at that age. I don't know how much is true of that, of course, but like, I mean, he's still making the movie in 2009, 2010, right? So, like, the idea that the late 2000s aren't there, I find fascinating.
How about this idea, though? I think if this movie, say, leave out the mechanistic, you know, functional limitations and just think of the concept. I just think people in the 90s, you know, would just scoff at it and would label it as so foreign, so on the nose. Whereas in the 2000s, late 2000s, we were at kind of the mass adoption era of the internet and social media and the idea of conceptualizing together this shared online space. I don't know. Maybe I'm grasping at straws here, but the idea of there being, you know, us creating this new community, this new era, this new place for us to kind of join together and, I don't know, you know, almost breaking down walls, but I don't know, redefining how we interact with each other. But I agree.
I think.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I think you're reminding me of that like BuzzFeed article that you sent me to, like the broken time thing.
Oh yeah.
But no, but it's interesting because the movie's like a couple years before Instagram really hits a kind of peak or like mass adoption, but it's still a few years after Facebook is starting to get to that like 100 million or what is it, 1 billion user type thing. But it is kind of interesting is like the whole like idea of making the dream space without like, or with only so much of the real world in it. That like you can't rely on memory, you can't rely on like real places because things fall apart in this collective world.
Yeah. No, for sure. All right, Connor. So our resident political dissident. I'm going to.
Which direction, Kirk?
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. You're just a dissident. You don't care.
Okay.
It's unilateral, indiscriminate. But I was curious when I was watching the film today. You know, obviously the main part of the movie is the heist, and we are presented, I think Nolan was presented with an opportunity to go in various different directions in terms of what he wanted to gain from the heist, what the motivations were. And so, like you mentioned earlier, Anthony mentioned, is like breaking up a monopoly. But it could have been something as significant as planting an idea of, I don't know, liberalism in a despot's head or something. Like it could have gone so much more been so much more politically charged. So what do you think? Do you think Nolan played it safe with this choice, or do you think he kind of was trying to reconcile the idea that he was already pushing the viewer. He wanted it to be like that scene where they're sitting on the rooftop and he's saying, this monopoly cannot stand. He wanted that to be secondary to the actual dreaming and the sequencing instead of the actual motivation for the heist.
Yeah, I think he's mostly working on the psychological and the personal level in this movie. Not to say he's not touching on some things that are political import. To me, my impression is we kind of live in a near dystopia that is not very dystopic and that it's not too different from our own,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where like it seems to be that there are these big power companies that like are vying for control, and so that Saito is the main rival of Fisher's company. Right. And so that casts into doubt, right, the motivation, right? Ultimately, he's breaking it up so that maybe that Saito's company can move in, or at least that was my impression this whole time. So he's ultimately doing it, not just for money, but, ultimately so Saito can pull some strings, which he's that powerful. He can, basically, erase his record of his, charge for murder or being wanted for murder in the United States. So I figure, there's a little bit of an amorality to that, but ultimately it's it's all about to the great extent to which Cobb will go, right?
I see.
Maybe just a hint of there's a certain again amorality, a kind of a certain cynical view on the world, maybe. Sorry, right. Tony.
No, I think you're right, but I was going to say that I would tie in the Saito character to kind of the filmmaking metaphor, because to me Saito is like, this movie costs a lot of money, right? He needs like $100 million, right? And or however much this costs, it probably costs 200 million or something. But like, this is like a big corporation has to front the money for this, right? And he's basically, this movie is a large blockbuster entertainment. He's serving the interests of capitalism in doing this, right? It's not because Saito's not fronting up the money because, Leo is some dreamer and he has to like reconcile with his dead wife and kids. He's doing it because he wants to like eliminate competition, right? There's no benevolent purpose here. It's just kind of a side thing. So that's probably how Nolan sees art. He sees it as like a marriage of convenience, right? He's like, he might not have any particular romantic view of the studio system or of like, he knows they mostly produce like kind of garbage and schlock and cookie cutter stuff, but it's like, this is what I need to kind of make this, to like come to terms with my own dead wife, whatever that is for him,
This is how I need to find my children and be absolved of my wife's murder. I mean, I see what you're saying, Tony, but like, again, the only place where I clearly see that artistic metaphor come up is in the conversation between Maul and Cobb in Limbo, where she kind of again plants that out. Of course, this is Cobb's own subconscious that he's talking to, but it is in the form of Maul, and she says, right, you have these, this all feels like a dream, being chased around, this paranoia, having to flee your home, being chased by all kinds of kind of agents, and you're having this kind of action movie adventure, right, which kind of gets a little bit meta, right? It seems to be gesturing at that this all is a dream in the sense that this is all is the action moviness kind of clues us into its own dreamlikeness, I guess. That's that when you said what you said about the art thing, that's what kind of I said, oh yeah, like that moment. But otherwise, I'm not really seeing it, or it has to be. It's a grand metaphor that I think is really cool, but I'm not seeing other points where I can make it map on, almost allegorically.
That was actually like my favorite part of this watch. Is I completely forgot about that scene until like this time, and I was like, I love that line that she tells him about like the whole like, how can you be more sure of your reality when your reality seems like the fantasy,
right?
And I love that because you could do whatever you want basically with that line. You could reinterpret the movie on a plot level, you could reinterpret it on a metaphorical thing, but ultimately I love that because it also gives like, in some sense, it's like, why is this Maul any more subjective or part of the subconscious as Unreal than they claim her to be. In some sense, it's like also her own statement of like being real, and it reminds me of like Neruda almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that she's a figment of his imagination, she's still real.
Well, that's the thing is like the whole time they're claiming it for to be sort of his subconscious, his thing.
Sure.
But in reality, that subconscious is more real for him, and it's real in and of itself because of what she's saying, like right there. I mean, after all, the subconscious has a material effect. And we see that like with Cillian Murphy's character by the end.
Right.
Sure. And okay, sorry, lore question. Who does Limbo
Howdy.
belong to? Like,
So
is Limbo? Sorry, Kirk.
No, I think it's the collective space of whoever's dreaming together.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not everybody on Earth. It's not totally Jungian, but it's like whoever's dreaming, and it's populated by whoever's been there. So in that case, there could be other people who have their own limbos, and then I don't know if the limbos fight, if Leonardo DiCaprio's limbo meets my limbo or whatever. But
My limbo
all of the
sequel.
people,
Limbo's ass, man.
all of the people on the GoldenEye base, those who have died and those who have gone into the dream, all of them, Saito, Fisher, Cobb, Ellen Page, Ariadne, they're all okay. That's their limbo that they're sharing together. Okay, makes sense.
I guess, but it's only the people who've only been there before. But yeah, no, it gets pretty arcane for sure. And that scene that you're both referencing, I found myself having more stamina this time, so I was actually able to enjoy the scene, the emotional climax, a little bit more instead of being so flustered. But it comes and goes. I know exactly what you're talking about, Connor.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just to put a little bow tie on it, for me, coming back to, this is all a personal journey for each of us. And for me, I'd like to understand that this movie, in parallel with my own understanding of the ideas of solipsism and dreaming versus reality, what's real, what's not, the idea is that it doesn't ultimately matter. And I know that's kind of cliche, like that song in Fallout New Vegas, if this is a dream, let me keep on dreaming. It's a love song to Sweetie, but I think that can resonate, and it can, ultimately offer some surrender for people trying to fight the constraints of their life and their understanding of what their life is and who they are, and just bring us back to the moment. I think that's, for me, kind of in this layman understanding of what the movie means. That's what I get from it. But let's move on. We got a quick segment. We're going to spend about 5 minutes on this, and I just want
one last thought before we move on.
Yeah,
Kurt?
go for it. Go
Thanks.
for it.
The one other thing I noticed on this viewing, real quick, was this movie has an incredible amount of like really beautiful and really iconic images. Like, it's a very written movie. It has this very arcane, very ornate script, but like the hallway fight and the folding city streets and stuff. These are images that I think we all just remember and just stick with us, and they're really iconic. And I think that one of Nolan's great talents as a director is to craft these kind of images. And anyway, that was my last observation.
All right. No, that's a good point. I think we could, if we all named one of his movies, we would all have a few slides pop into our head for sure. So that's a great point, Tony.
All I'm seeing is Bane flexing his muscles. That's all I'm seeing in my head.
I was born against it.
All the cops fighting, but none of them have guns yet. No. So let's move on. Now, we have done one Leo film before. If you don't know, I'm a very huge Leonardo DiCaprio fan. And we did one before. Might not have been the best selection. This was a Body of Lies. It's a deep cut for all you stans out there. But we're gonna just play a quick rating game and each give our own top 3 Leo performances. for whatever reason, if you want to expand on your choices, feel free. Brevity is key, of course, but whoever wants to go first, feel free to jump in.
I guess I'll go. No.
All right,
Sorry, I'm just
number three. Number 3 is Django Unchained, but my top 2 are very close. It took me a while to think of 3 because number 1 and 2 are like neck and neck for me because I think they're fairly different performances, but they're really amazing. I think Wolf of Wall Street.
I knew it.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to me has his single best moment of acting ever, which is where the little girl tells him he did a good job and he starts to almost cry. That's my favorite Leonardo DiCaprio moment of all time. So.
All right. So I think I was trying to figure this out. I think my favorite film of his, I'll just say, is still probably Catch Me If You Can. But my favorite performances are probably different. So let's see. Number 3, Celebrity, the Woody Allen film.
Wow. Okay.
Which he gives actually one of the worst Woody Allen impersonations, and it works. It's the highlight of that film, besides Winona Ryder. Number 2, it's a movie I think that everybody always kind of writes off as like silly, and like, Martin Scorsese doing his like, blockbuster film for money, but I really like him in Shutter Island.
Right.
All right. And then number 1, my favorite is Revolutionary Road. Very good, classic family drama film.
And the what would you call it? The reunion of
Kate
my
Winslet.
favorite on-screen couple of all time. Given that my favorite movie of all time, in case you didn't know, this is for bar trivia night, is Titanic. So that tells you all you need to know about me. I just lost half my viewers, my fans.
Sponsors are fleeing.
Yeah.
It's going to be a civil war of church fans. He sold out, man. No, he's so pure.
Yeah, the pre-admission
Kirk
Kirk
fans are
absolutely.
vicious, man. Oh, gee,
I
damn.
was being sarcastic, guys.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
Connor, what do you got?
I'll do you one better, Kirk. I'm going to give you little impressions for each of my favorite
Oh,
movies. Number 1, in no particular order, Way of the Future. Way of the Future.
Aviator.
Yeah. Aviator. Next one. He does this a lot.
The Revenant.
My French wife killed my kids. Okay.
Wait.
Which I confused with Inception as well. Shutter Island.
Shutter Island.
These are more like my favorite movies that have Leo in them, I have to say.
Yeah.
And of course, you guys said a lot of the good ones. And the last one is, actually, I don't think I can do it on the podcast. He speaks African Pidgin English, and it's really uncomfortable.
Blood Diamond?
Blood Diamond, yes.
Yeah.
Wow. No one said Body of Lies.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah, fuck that movie. No, I'm kidding.
Is
Blood
Rhodesia,
Diamond is much worse, I think.
is the term Rhodesia, I know it's now Zimbabwe, but is it a racially charged term? Is it like a
I think
colonial
you should say
term?
Zimbabwe. Yeah, Rhodesia is named after Cecil Rhodes,
Okay, so it's an anachronism. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
But it takes place when it was called that, right?
yeah. Oh, Anthony, I thought you were gonna throw The Great Gatsby in there. I was for sure.
No.
Your favorite book of all time? No.
Okay, but really though, it's Anthony. The thing that Tony said. Tony, I keep seeing your name. Your name says Anthony on your Zoom thing, so I keep calling you Anthony. But Tony, sorry, but what Tony said about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that's probably like the greatest moment ever.
Yeah, there's some overlap here for sure. I'm just kind of scrolling his page. I do think we would be remiss if we didn't mention, and maybe in our age, in this society we live in today, What's Eating Gilbert Grape is maybe a little more controversial than it was 27 years ago. I'm not sure, but that was an excellent performance. The Aviator was excellent, and Yeah, I think for me his best performance was Shutter. Well, it's tied between Shutter Island and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I think those are his two best. But you know, he's come a long way, that's for sure. We've seen him kind of grow up before our eyes, or at least I have, being a little bit older than you all. But you know, he's still got a long ways to go, hopefully, and we'll see what's in store, and hopefully in 20 years we'll be talking
He's only
about.
beginning to become a good actor. You'll see him in a couple of years.
Yeah, exactly.
10 more years. Oh man.
Also, The Departed.
Departed.
Gangs of New
Also,
York.
Gangs in New York is a good one. Catch Me If You Can. That was a really good choice, Anthony. And also the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet.
None of us said The
Yes.
Revenant, the movie he actually won an Oscar for.
It's not
I
his
never
best.
actually saw
He
it.
won it because he got cold.
He slept inside a horse. It was great. All right, so let's head on to our final segment.
Well, we didn't vote.
Oh yeah, we have to vote quick. All right, let's get a vote. I think the only undecided vote here is Anthony, but let's hear it.
So I'll
I'm a
go.
yes. I'm a yes. I'll move on.
All right, Connor.
Okay, Kirk and everybody, I think you guys offered some wonderful takes on this movie. I'm sticking with my initial impression, which is confused and admiring it, but being kind of completely overwhelmed. I just don't have the brain for this movie. I got to say no.
Well, I don't think I'm as high on Nolan as especially Tony, but or Kirk.
Yeah,
But
I'm pretty high on Nolan too.
Yeah, but I liked it enough. Yeah, I definitely think it's up there. I still have a soft spot for The Prestige,
The Prestige.
which I rewatched recently or not too long ago, and it definitely didn't hold up as well as I thought it would. But I think this one was good.
Good.
Okay.
I'm surprised,
Fair
honestly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed. Good job, Kirk.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm
Your
so
sob
glad.
story won us over.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you guys for playing along. So now we have to choose our next movie. So let me hear your pitches. Give me some choices. And if this is your first episode, they're all going to nominate a movie, and then I'll choose which one I want to watch, or which one I think belongs in our canon the most, and we'll watch it next week and do it all over again. So
according to the time-honored rules of the 706, I'm the last person to go. Doesn't
All right.
mean that I have to offer my movie, though. I can choose for someone else to choose it, so I have time to think of what I'm going to say. So
Okay.
I choose Anthony.
Ooh.
All right.
You're
Well,
ready, Anthony. I don't want to put you on the spot.
no, I'm ready. But so I did two in a row, so I know the odds are pretty stacked against me. So I'm going to nominate.
Oh, but then the burners, the burners are the best ones.
No, this isn't a burner. This is a far left field choice, because I know Kirk appreciates the sort of risk taking here, this sort of oddball choice, especially coming from me. But I'm going to nominate M. Night Shyamalan's Glass.
Wow.
Damn.
What a pick.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yes.
I still want to see it.
I haven't seen it either.
Okay.
Give us a 10-second. What is it? It's the one with
It's. Have you guys seen Unbreakable?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Everyone's seen Unbreakable.
I've
right?
seen all of them. Yeah.
Okay, so it's the sequel to Unbreakable and Split, but essentially, and I hate using the phrase, but it's the deconstruction of the sort of comic book mythology, the superhero, but it is a fascinating look at the psychoses and the sort of symptomatic culture of the effect of comic books on the mind of individuals. It takes an approach that I think is absolutely brilliant. Half of us would hate it. Half of us would like it, Connor.
Iron Giant did it better.
which
Yeah,
did it better?
Sorry.
No, go ahead. All right.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Good choice. Interesting. I've been wanting to see it. Tony, I'm guessing, because Connor will want to go last.
Okay.
Sure, Tony, if you're ready.
Well, Glass is all fine and good. But what about some dang gems? Some uncut gems. I know Kirk has seen it. I don't think you two have seen it. Pretty recent movie, obviously.
As a matter of fact, Tony.
Or did you watch it already?
I watched it 2 nights ago.
Oh my God! You know what? Can I switch? Is that allowed?
Sure,
I don't think it's necessary. It should be up to Kirk. Sorry, I don't want to affect the decision too much.
I
would be happy to watch it.
Considering this is unprecedented waters. I don't think we've ever had somebody watch a movie so recently.
Yeah, I don't want to make him watch it right away. That's fine. Never
Sorry,
mind.
Tony.
My backup. Well, it's okay because I was on the fence until a second ago, like I always am. Is a movie that is very apropos to the time we're living in with a pandemic and quarantine. Oh, no. It's not what you're thinking. It's Safe, starring Julianne Moore in the 90s with Todd Haynes, or by Todd Haynes. And this is like a really good, like classic, discussable movie. It just got a lot to it. It's a pretty slow movie. It's a pretty quiet movie, but it's got a really strong performance at its core. And there's just a lot to it. It's very, very chewy. There's a lot of fascinating scenes, a lot of fascinating moments. And I think it resonates with a lot of kind of political issues and current events in ways that I think would be really interesting to explore. And it's a good like mental health movie as well.
Oh, Tony, that's so shameless.
I actually have my own backstory.
Mental health.
What was the one movie we watched and it just resurfaced? It was about an unstable wife.
A woman under the influence.
Yes.
Yeah. Wonder Under the Influence.
That Cassavetes.
Cassavetes.
Right?
Yeah.
John Cassavetes.
Connor pick.
That was a great one. All right, Connor, go for it.
Okay, my movie is called The Americanization of Emily. It's from 1964. It's known as a very controversial kind of early counterculture movie. And I would say it's set during World War II. You could call it kind of a farcical take on the D-Day invasion. And it is a movie that still shocks. It can still shock you with some of its really radical kind of anti-war rhetoric. And it's just one of the most effective. It's a movie that I watched not too long ago, and its message still sticks with me. I have to kind of interrogate myself a lot to kind of think about the message of the movie and kind of see how I can apply it in my daily life in a lot of ways. And it's just really cool. It stars Julie Andrews in a relatively not that early role, but a really interesting role. And yeah, it's cool.
All right, fair enough. Any rebuttals to be offered? Anyone want to throw some shade on the competition?
I think, Kirk, since you're hosting, I got to step up to your role today, so I'm going to try to do a Kirk rebuttal here.
Oh, my gosh. All right, here we go.
Okay, let me make sure I heard these movies right, guys. If I wanted to see Samuel L. Jackson's ass, I would just turn on Cinemax late at night. And The Exorcism of Emily Rose, what is that? Some crappy horror movie? All right, that's all.
All right.
Good.
All right.
Good.
Well,
Sounds good.
I feel like Connor's movie is interesting. I feel like he stole it from a Gallatin syllabus. So
it's a purely emotional experience. I would not say it's intellectual.
Oh, okay. I don't know anything about it, so I can't say anything bad. I never even heard of it.
I think you would enjoy it. I'm not sure. I could see some qualms you might have, but
okay. Tony, actually, I saw Safe years ago on Tony's recommendation, and maybe Tyler's. Can't remember. It was a long time ago. It's one of the first movies I remember watching on the Criterion when it streamed on Hulu. So I'd be perfectly fine with either their choices, actually. I think Glass, Kirk, you appreciate contemporary films that take a chance and take a risk and are willing to embrace a sort of populism to have something to say. So that's what I'll argue for Glass.
My gosh. Wow.
I would say, Glass. It's a gutsy move, Anthony. It's a wacky pick. You know, it's going to be like we're going to have some laughs. Sure. But in the end, are we going to be happy we watched it? We're going to get a good discussion out of it? I don't think so.
Some of the best.
And as for Safe, I've seen it. And that was a movie when Tony mentioned it, I was just like, oh, Safe. That was a movie that I had hidden in the depths of my heart as like a movie I truly loved. And it just brought up all these feelings. So actually, I really love Safe, and I would love to watch it again. But it's not as good as Americanization of Emily.
And it's a safe choice.
It's a safe choice.
safe.
Yeah, like, oh, this safe space, mumbo jumbo or whatever. Yeah, I can't do the Kirk thing. Anyway.
All right. So, this is a tough one. This is actually these are some great choices and some great arguments for and against. Let's see. Let me start. Whose heart should I break first? You know what? I think it is tough. It is tough. I think I'm gonna have to say, Tony, the word that Mark Wahlberg said to the director when after the sex scene with Julianne Moore in Boogie Nights, he said he was safe, but he actually wasn't because he now had herpes. I'm gonna have to turn down Safe. And Anthony, the biopic about Breaking Bad and how meth is created and how Bryan Cranston is actually quadriplegic, I'm going to have to turn that one down. And Connor, your Naughty America profile of Emily Rose, I'm going to have to choose that one.
Okay.
It sounds seduction. It sounds salacious, and I can't wait to watch it on some 1-2-3 movie bootleg site because I'm sure it's not on any streaming service anyway.
Just
I
kills
happen
it.
to have a source, and it's pretty reliable.
All right, there we go. Okay, well, Connor hasn't really failed me in the past, and he hasn't gone for a while, and he did appeal to the viscera of it, the raw kind of how he reflects upon it continuously. I like movies that allow me to reflect upon my own life, so we'll go with that one for next week. But I just wanted to thank my panel for joining us, and thank you, the audience, for listening. And we'll be back with another one soon. Thanks, folks. Take it easy.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Womp. Oh, can we do a segment where we do an all like a gender swapped version of the I'll have what she's having scene? I was something we mentioned. I'm like, that's
why
brilliant.
did Billy Crystal do it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kirk was deep in the 4chan days.
Oh.
You can't really prolong it. Yeah, that's what's hard to do is you can't do the slow build up. Yeah, you have to it's harder to do for a guy.
It actually would have been really funny if the movie had just done that, played it straight, had Billy Crystal being like, guys have faked it, right? Like, she's like, no, they haven't. And he just does the whole, like, ridiculous, like...
I'm gonna come or whatever. Like,